What is up, everyone? Welcome to Den Geek Presents Marvel Standom Special Edition. I'm your host, Mike Cicchini, the editor-in-chief of DennyGeek.com. And yes, I miss Alec and Kirsty too, but don't worry, they'll be back. I promise. But I've got a special guest this week in the form of Jed MacKay, writer of one of the best Moon Knight runs ever. Forget that lousy TV show. You absolutely must read this Moon Knight comic. It's so good. Now, do you like my spooky background? Good, because Moon Knight is a spooky book. It's packed with serious nighttime atmosphere, vampires, and I mean a lot of vampires. They're even teasing the arrival of none other than Dracula as an antagonist. And I just can't get over the fact that Dracula is just like a major recurring villain in Marvel Comics. And I'm just living for the day that's actually a thing in the MCU as well. But that's a conversation for another time. But to make this book even cooler, there's even a fun crossover with Werewolf by Night in the latest annual. So we get into all of that, including the fact that Jed also co-created Hunter's Moon. No, not the awesome Ghost song. Hunter's Moon is, for my money at least, the best villain in Moon Knight history. But there's a little warning I got to give you here. There's some big spoilers for the latest issue of Moon Knight. So if you haven't, and I'd say there's probably like minor spoilers for the Moon Knight annual as well. So if you haven't at least read Moon Knight through issue number 16 and maybe that Moon Knight annual, you might want to check out of here and come back after the fact if you don't want to be spoiled. But in the meantime, for everybody else, let's hear what Jed had to say. So in the spirit of the season, I feel like between Moon Knight and Strange, you're kind of the keeper of Marvel's weird, supernatural, spooky stuff right now. Is that a fair assessment?
I don't know if keeper is accurate, but they certainly give me plenty of it to play with.
When your run on Moon Knight started up last year, from the first issue, I'm like, oh, cool. Like there's going to be weird supernatural stuff, and like there's vampires, and I love vampires. I didn't expect at the time for vampires to become like the driving force of the run. Like, it's not just about Reese now, it's like every single issue, this has been a very sinister, slow build, and it feels like you're not even close to done with that vampire story.
Yeah, I mean, we introduced the structure, the vampiric pyramid cult sort of system. We saw it as a very American form of vampirism, a very American form of vampire hierarchy, as opposed to, your old world monarchies and whatnot. We introduced them in the first issue, and then I always knew, have them in my back pocket for what we were going to do after we resolved the Zodiac arc, as it is with comics, if we were going to do something after we resolved the Zodiac arc. But we got extended, and we dove right in there. So we have that whole situation, kind of rapidly reaching a boiling point, and we're going to see, in the next issue that's coming out this month, a little more history behind that, a little more understanding of why things are happening the way they are, and what is going to need to be done in order to deal with it.
There's so many different ways to approach Moon Knight, and there have been 7 different Moon Knight series over the last decade or something like that, or 15 years, and some of them are very much street level action hero stories, and some of them have been very superhero-y, and some of them have been more focused on the mental elements than your run was, at least at first. So how would you kind of define your approach to Moon Knight? Because it is very superhero-y, but it's also not.
The kind of byword, the touchstone we had when we started this Moon Knight series was, I want to put Moon Knight back where I thought he worked best, which is, on the street, but also didn't want him bumping up into, Daredevil territory or Spider-Man territory, heaven forbid, Punisher territory. So the idea was street level but weird, where, you go to Spider-Man if someone's shaking you down, you go to Moon Knight if someone's shaking you down, and they also turn into a werewolf when the moon comes up, That's kind of the niche I think he fits in, because Moon Knight is himself impossibly weird character. He's a very strange man, just in the things that he does and the people he surrounds himself with and the kind of attitude he takes to things. So I think that's kind of where his niche fits. He's a bit of a misfit among the superhero community, and especially after the events that happened before, the Age of Khonshu that happened before the series started. He's someone who's largely on the outs with his colleagues or his peers, and it's interesting to see how he rebuilds himself from that point.
The approach, and I don't want you to take this the wrong way, because like some people, if you don't love weird stuff like I do, but at times, especially because of how many villains you've been able to introduce in the book and utilize, at times this almost feels like if Moon Knight had been like one of those like syndicated genre TV shows from the 90s or something, where it's like super high concept, like loving of its genre. I mean, your writing is a little better than what we got on a lot of those shows, but you know what I'm talking about, or am I just completely off base here?
No. I mean, I think you're really on the right track in that. One of the big things that appealed to me when I first kind of came up with this Midnight Mission idea is that it very much puts Moon Knight in a detective place, though he's not really a detective, and doesn't describe himself as a detective. But I really love those 70s procedural detective shows, like Rockford or Columbo, or you can get into Simon and Simon and stuff like that, or Magnum PI. And I love that episodic format, and I really think that's what we really leaned into when the series began. A one and done story, but there's still things building up for the arc as it continues. So I don't think you're wrong there. It's just my inspiration was less about 90s genre episodic stuff, and more in 70s genre detective kind of stuff. Yeah. But yeah, no, like that episodic structure, that building that framework that we can tell single stories, and that acts as a generative engine for creating new stories. There's always an excuse for someone to walk in those doors, sit down, and have Mr. Knight tell them, welcome to the Midnight Mission. My name is Mr. Knight. How can I help? So, failing any other inspiration, I can always just go to that.
And that assortment of villains has been great, and it's a great, I mean, look, I feel like all Moon Knight villains pretty much are deep cuts, just by definition, right? So, there's been like Waxman and Zodiac, of course, like that was a great arc, but, and Rutherford Winter, but Hunter's Moon is a winner. Like Hunter's Moon is sticking around and has really, hit something with fans there. You talk about the creation of Hunter's Moon?
Yeah, of course. Actually, this is one of those situations that writers hate, where they have to admit that their editor was right. Back when I was
as an editor, go on.
Please do tell. Back when I was first putting ideas together for Moon Knight, I was just kind of throwing a lot of stuff around because I was really psyched for the book. I really wanted to get the job, so I'm like, I'm just throw all my biggest ideas in here and just like kind of go over the top with it. And one of the ideas I had was that Moon Knight wasn't the only fist of Khonshu, and that there were fists of Khonshu in every nation around the world. And at one point they would get quite irritated with him, and then sort of descend en masse in New York to straighten him out. And Tom Brevoort saw that, and he's like, I like that idea. I'm like, oh, thanks, Tom. That's great. Getting praise from Tom is a real ego booster. He's like, but it doesn't work. I was like, oh man. He's like, I don't like, no one really cares if there's a whole bunch of Moon Knights. It just kind of like dilutes the brand if they're all extant at the same time. He's like, but if you give me one that stands in opposition, your Old New Testament, your left and right hand. And I'm just like, yeah, that works so much better. That's a really good idea. And then just kind of developed it from there, because it really refined the just kind of the purity of that idea of this rival character who is very similar. They both have the same job, but ideologically divergent, where they have, Bader and Mark have very different interpretations of what it means to be a Fist of Khonshu, what they should be doing, how they should be acting, what the relationship with Khonshu should be. It's just been kind of endlessly fascinating. He's a character who sort of has developed on the page in ways that I hadn't originally expected, and have really come to enjoy. Like I was writing a Moon Knight issue 6 where he's patching him up, and he tells Mark Spector, he's like, I may not like you, I may not even respect you, but we have the same father, which means that we're brothers. And I was like, I don't think I planned that until I actually wrote it on the page. I was like, yeah, he's got me. Yeah. So yeah, Hunter's Moon I really enjoy. I think he's a character I've had a lot of fun with, and I always look back to the terrible sketch I drew when I first came up with the character and sent to Alessandro, and then he sent back this incredible, like, polished, like, iconic design Where I'm like, there's not a lot of new superhero costumes you see that you're like, that's it. Like it's unlike any. You can tell it's a Moon Knight related character, but it's fully their own. So yeah, he did an amazing job there.
Hunter's Moon kind of looks cooler than Moon Knight.
Don't tell Declan Shelby that.
And then Tudor.
Tudor.
You think Tudor's here to stay?
I mean, the Tudor is certainly. The thing is, Tudor is really making a lot of moves, and he's really pushing Moon Knight, and pushing him quite far, as we'll see in the very near future. But Tudor's never been in a room with Moon Knight yet, and when that happens, it's going to be a very interesting experience for both of them.
So now we're going to talk some spoilers. Just back to Hunter's Moon for a second.
Yeah.
The end of number 16 sure is something.
Yeah, it's. I'm not really sure how it's going to go down. I think it's a great moment. I think it's a dramatic moment that makes sense, and I'm very curious what people's reactions are. So yeah, Hunter's Moon is quite badly treated throughout. Towards the back end of number 16, he's bushwhacked on a rooftop, which I think is probably just the original Ninja Turtles movie coming back to me.
Oh my God, that is like the
as
best
it always
scene.
Does. It's fantastic. We leave Hunter's Moon. The moon is set.
Has it though? No.
Well, I mean, there's one thing we know the Fists of Khonshu do,
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens.
I'm sorry, but that scene you're talking about in the first Ninja Turtles movie, until the Daredevil TV show came along, that was the best Daredevil movie scene ever filmed.
Oh, I've said for years that original Ninja Turtles movie was the best Daredevil movie of all time.
Now, your annual, you reunite the characters. Like Moon Knight's first appearance was in Werewolf by Night. Some changes have happened in Jack Russell's life. I have not kept up with everything going on with that character through the years. So now he's the King of Wolves. Well, what's up with Jack Russell now?
Well, Jack Russell's the King of all wolves. He's as he says in the annual, he fought his way to ascendancy during the when all the werewolves of North America came together. He proved himself in the Winter Wars in Quebec against the Wendigo, and now he is the leader of all werewolves, or at least in title. Jack Russell's character, from his very first appearance, he's had a long history with the Darkhold. And his family's, is tied up with it years ago, or many years, many generations, and he has read the Darkhold himself, and he has found something he wants. He wants to free his people, the werewolves, from bondage to the moon, and the moon as represented by everyone's favorite Khonshu. Does
the annual take place between issues 15 and 16, or does it take place earlier in the run?
The issue takes place roughly the same time as issue 15. It's kind of like in between the raindrops there. I think perhaps I just didn't think to ask when these issues were coming out, because Hunter's Moon, of course, appears in Moon Knight Annual number 1. And as we alluded to before, Moon Knight number 16, Hunter's Moon isn't moving around a whole lot by the end of it. Yes, this does take place before the events of number 16. For any confusion, you can feel free to blame me for not paying attention to the publication schedule.
It's not your fault. You don't set that. Last thing, issue 16, you do drop a big bombshell about what the Tudors' ambitions are. And it's the first time, as far as I know at least, that Dracula's name has been mentioned in the Marvel Universe in quite some time. What is the status of that character, and what are the kind of rules when you start bringing Dracula back?
Actually, Dracula's been making some big moves over in Avengers for a while. He's
not caught up on Avengers.
There you go. Yeah, no, he's established the Vampire Nation of Chernobyl. So it's the only UN, or maybe not UN, but internationally recognized vampire nation on the planet. So as far as movers and shakers in the vampire world go, if you're trying to make big moves politically, big moves socially in the vampire world, power plays, Dracula's the guy you're gonna have to deal with. As we see the Tudor, he's making a move to get in with Dracula. He wants to take his operation internationally. Wants to become a rising force in the vampire world. He's already well established in New York. Wants to take it further, and we're going to see how that shakes out, because he's invited a lot of friends over. It might be some party crashers. I don't know.
Thank you so much.
Oh, no problem.
And that's it for this episode of Marvel Standom Special Edition. Don't worry, Alec and Kirsty will return, and we'll be back to doing these live on Twitch soon enough. But in the meantime, Make sure you're subscribing to us wherever you're watching or listening right now. And do check out our live home. We are twitch.tv/DennyGeekTV. Hit up DennyGeek.com/Marvel for all our awesome Marvel coverage as well. We are at Marvel Standom on Twitter and Instagram. Drop us a line there. Let us know your burning questions and what you want us to cover in upcoming episodes. I would say send your hate mail there, but you know what? Don't do it. If you want to get mad at me, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Way Out Stuff. Anyway, I think that's it for this episode. Happy Halloween, everybody. And remember, folks, we stand together.